Hi, Martha.
Hi there, John. Good evening to you. Thanks so much. So, nearly 18 years ago, we all watched these scenes in horror as it unfolded in New York, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and of course, at the Pentagon. Islamist radical terrorists had attacked the United States and had killed almost 3,000 Americans on that early September morning. Days later, President Bush promised there would be retaliation.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
It was clear that life had to change in America. The government worked to harden our airports, our ports of entry around the country, all designed to prevent another attack.
The Department of Homeland Security will have nearly 170,000 employees, dedicated professionals who will wake up each morning with the overriding duty of protecting their fellow citizens. I'm pleased to announce that I will nominate Governor Tom Ridge as our nation's first Secretary of Homeland Security.
DHS had a heavy burden to bear, and 18 years later, it appears that their work has worked. But this week, the entire apparatus has now come into question by a new member of Congress who at the time was 12 years old on September the 11th.
Did you get rid of Homeland Security too?
I think so. I think we need to undo a lot of the egregious mistakes that the Bush administration did. It is a very qualified and supported position, at least in terms of evidence and in terms of being able to make the argument that we never should have created DHS in the early 2000s.
Karl Rove lived through 9/11 at President Bush's side as his deputy chief of staff, and he joins me now, and our panel joins me in just a moment as well. Karl, thanks for being here. What goes through your mind as you listen to her saying that we really need to get rid of what was created after September 11th?
I think it's moronic, stupid, naive, and dumb, and a strong message to follow. I can't believe that a member of Congress, admittedly, she was 11, about ready to turn 12 the following month, but she should study the lessons of history. She should talk to her colleagues. She should investigate what happened. I was there on 9/11. I was the guy that at 8:48 a.m. walked up to the President of the United States and said, a plane has flown into the World Trade Center. We don't know if it's jet or prop, private or commercial. I was with him all day, and I saw a man in that day resolve that within the Constitution and laws of the United States, he would do everything necessary to protect our country against a similar attack. And the Department of Homeland Security had brought together a series of agencies and departments and capabilities to meet that challenge. Some of those capabilities didn't exist before the Department of Homeland Security. Does she really want us to go back to an age in which which you can go and board an airplane carrying a box cutter or a bomb? Does she really want our borders to be unprotected? Does she really want to abolish the customs? Does she want to get rid of the Secret Service? The Department of Homeland Security has kept us safe. And she ought to, if she doesn't believe that, have her go talk to her colleague, the Democrat chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the House and Senate. Go have her talk to the Democrat chairman of the Intelligence Committee and ask for a briefing. Go across to Langley and ask for a briefing on what the DHS and our intelligence agencies have been able to foil in the way of plots against America. Go talk to the New York Police Department, for God's sake, and talk to them about how DHS has helped her city, the city that she claims to represent in the United States Congress, from having suffered through other horrible incidents, including bombs in Times Square. I would like her to go to the parents and the loved ones who lost someone on 9/11 who live in her district in New York and ask them if they think that the United States of America should be placed in a place where other families will have to suffer through the pain and grief that they have. The Department of Homeland Security was a great accomplishment, bipartisan in nature. It protects our country. It provided a new way to meet the challenges of the 21st century, and those challenges have not gone away, no matter what Congressman Ocasio-Cortez may think.
Well said. And I think it is shocking, especially from a New Yorker, who has to know people who were in the line of fire that day, people who are related to the members of our fire department who ran up those staircases and many of whom never came down them, to have that, lack of context for the understanding of the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, I think is somewhat surprising, especially for someone who is an elected official. The problem is that the context now has shifted so completely to what's going on at the border. Now, there is overcrowding at the border. There are a lot of agencies who are tasked with organizing the chaos, trying to organize the chaos and the overwhelming nature of the number of people who are coming in here. With regard to that part of the story, does DHS need to make any adjustments, Karl?
Well, it needs to grow. I mean, look, what amazes me is we had problems under President Obama. We had problems under President Bush in coping with surges. President Obama had a terrible problem in coping with a surge of Central Americans. He was the first president who began to deal with the kind of crisis we have today. That is to say, not single men coming up from Mexico or South America or Central America looking for jobs, but families, large numbers of families and large numbers of children coming to this country. And he had to deal with them. I don't remember the outrage of Democrats. And maybe it was because she was still tending bar at that point. But if she wants to be clear about this, then let her attack President Obama for having constructed walls. Let her attack President Obama for having detained people. Let her attack President Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security, Jed Johnson, who has spoken out so, I think, courageously about how this is a real crisis that ought to be dealt with in a bipartisan way. You know what? She views the world through a left-wing prism, and so she can't deal with the reality that we face as a country. That we are in grave difficulty if we do not control our borders. I'm a big proponent of immigration reform. I'm a huge proponent of immigration. I am a great-grandson of an immigrant. And yet I know that we have to control our borders. And for her to sort of blithely and sort of dismissively, I mean, how condescending when she says, well, the evidence is there. And it's an informed opinion. No, it's not. It is about a misinformed opinion I've seen coming out of a member of Congress in a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to know, when you look back at that quote, she talks about how, there's people understand all the evidence and that there's this, sort of consensus, she suggests, that DHS has to go. And then you look at the frustration that we've seen in Nancy Pelosi this week, and she essentially said, no, there isn't. I've got, 4 individuals in Congress, and they have 4 votes who seem to feel the way that they do about, supporting the money that needs to go to fixing the problem at the border. How do you feel about the bind that Nancy Pelosi finds herself in with regard to this, Karl?
Well, she's a tough leader. She's smart. She knows she got into the speakership because the Democrats took 31 seats held by Republicans that were carried by Donald Trump. And you look at those centrists, they understand the reality that we have to deal with and are trying to act in a bipartisan way on many of these issues with regard to immigration. But, AOC is right. There is a consensus in Congress among 4 members of the Congress. It's AOC and Tlaib and Omar and maybe 1 or 2 others. They're the nuts. They're the people who have these really outrageous viewpoints and try and pass them off as if they are normal and ordinary and worthy of serious consideration by the United States Congress and the American people. The idea that we're going to abolish the Department of Homeland Security assumes that the world has changed in a way that it has not changed. We face a threat from abroad. We have to have secure borders. We have Islamic terrorists who want to destroy our country. We have held the deal each and every year since 9/11 with plots to strike the homeland, many of them aimed at the city that she represents. So I'd say wake up, get a grip on reality and realize that you are dealing in a world that requires things like the Department of Homeland Security.
Karl Rove, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Rachel Campos-Duffy.